Just at dinner, sir. We're on our way home.
That's not what I asked. Where exactly?
Meridian Steakhouse, about 20 minutes drive from here, sir.
That's your sister?
That's my wife sitting there.
Step out of the vehicle, sir.
I'm a federal judge, son.
Step out or I'll shoot.
The last thing Ruby Smith did before she was shot was make a phone call, not to family, not to Idris, to 911. Her voice on that recording is calm and specific. She names the smell coming off the man with the badge. She gives their location on the highway. She says they are trying to get somewhere safe. The call is time-stamped. It was received by Gary Ragsdale's own department while he was still behind their car. Ragsdale had no idea it was happening. That call is the reason he is now serving 14 years, and Ruby Smith is not here to know it. If you believe accountability should follow a badge wherever it goes, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Drop your location in the comments. This story is reaching every corner, and I want to know where in the world you are watching from. This is what happened on a county road in Harlan County, Georgia on a Friday night in October. The flashlight came through the driver's window without warning. The beam landed on Idris Smith's face before the cruiser had fully stopped behind them, before the dust off the shoulder had settled, before either of them had fully processed that the lights in the rear view were for them. The voice that followed was loud, too loud for the situation, with the particular overcorrection of someone working to sound authoritative while his body was pulling against him. The command was to step out, both of them, right now. Idris did not move immediately, not out of resistance, but out of the half-second recalibration a person does when something arrives wrong before they can name what is wrong about it. Harlan County sat flat under a clear October sky. The highway between town and the county line was the kind of road that asked nothing of the people who drove it. No sharp curves, no unmarked intersections, no history of trouble. Idris had driven it 3 nights a week for 3 years. He knew every mile of it. At 10:47 on a Friday night with the windows up and the heat running low, it was just the road home. Idris Smith was 41. He had taken the same job, lived in the same county, driven the same routes long enough that most of his decisions were automatic. Ruby, 38, his wife of 4 years, had her shoes off in the passenger seat. She was a sitting federal judge for the Northern District of Georgia, a position she had held for 6 years, appointed after a decade as a federal prosecutor. They had eaten at Meridian Steakhouse, a reservation, white tablecloths, the kind of place where the bill came in a leather folder. It had been a good dinner, the kind that ends with both people deciding they should do this more often. They were not speeding. The plates were clean. There was no reason the lights should have been for them. Gary Ragsdale had pulled out of a shoulder position he had held for 40 minutes. He ran the plates clean. He pulled out anyway and fell in behind them at the intersection before the bridge. He followed for less than a quarter mile before activating the lights. He approached the driver's window on foot. The walk was slightly overcorrected. Not a stagger, not anything dramatic, but the careful deliberateness of a man monitoring his own gait. He held the flashlight steady with the concentration of someone who had learned sometime earlier that evening that steadiness required effort. Idris lowered the window. The smell arrived immediately. Bourbon, not faint, not residual, present and direct in the cold night air coming off the deputy standing at the window with a weapon on his hip and a badge on his chest. Idris provided his license and registration without being asked twice. Ragsdale took them and studied them for a beat that extended past the time the task required. Then he asked where Idris had been that night. Idris told him. Ragsdale asked again the same question, not a follow-up, the identical question, as if the answer had dissolved somewhere between Idris's mouth and Ragsdale's comprehension. Then Ragsdale moved the flashlight to the passenger seat and asked if Ruby was Idris's sister. She was his wife, 4 years. The rings were in the flashlight beam. Ruby looked at Idris. Idris looked at the road ahead. Ragsdale said something else. The bodycam captured it. The words slightly collapsed into each other, and he reached for the door handle on the outside of the vehicle. Idris's hand moved to the window controls instinctively, then stopped. The engine was running. The road ahead was empty and straight. Ruby's voice, when it came, was not loud. It was the opposite of loud, controlled and flat. The register of a person who has run a calculation and arrived at a number. The man outside the window smelled like a bar. He had a loaded weapon. He was asking questions that did not hold together on a road with no witnesses in either direction, and he had just tried to open their door. She told Idris to go. Not a suggestion, not panic. A conclusion reached by someone who had correctly identified every variable in a situation she had not asked to be in. Ruby Smith had spent over a decade in federal courtrooms, parsing the precise mechanics of unlawful conduct. What was standing at the window met every standard she knew. She told Idris to go. Idris hesitated. The hesitation lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4, long enough to understand that the alternative still existed, that staying, complying, waiting for the moment to pass was still available as a choice. Then it wasn't. The car pulled away from the shoulder and back onto the highway, gathering speed without drama. 2 people putting distance between themselves and something that had been wrong from the moment the flashlight came through the window. Ruby reached for her phone. Ragsdale moved back toward his cruiser with the same deliberate gait. He keyed the radio. The transmission came out correctly. Vehicle fled. Stop. Direction of travel. Description. In the professional, compressed language every officer learns before their first shift, the words were accurate. The sequence was right. They were delivered by a man whose blood alcohol content, as the toxicology report would confirm weeks later, registered at 0.16, twice the legal driving limit, close to 4 times the threshold any department in the state permitted for an officer on active duty. He drew his weapon before he reached his cruiser door. He raised it at the rear of the retreating vehicle, a car carrying 2 unarmed people on a public Georgia highway, and fired once. The shot missed. The car kept moving. Ragsdale got in the cruiser and started the engine. In the passenger seat, Ruby had her phone to her ear. The rearview mirror showed the cruiser's lights coming on. The road ahead was straight and dark. She was already talking to someone. The chapter closes there, before the reader knows who was on the other end of the line. She had called 911. The call connected within seconds of the car clearing the shoulder. The recording, which existed, which was time-stamped, which was being received by Harlan County Dispatch while Gary Ragsdale's cruiser was less than 300 yards behind them, captured her voice giving their location on the highway, the vehicle following them, the deputy's physical condition as she had observed it at the window, the smell, the questions that did not track, the attempt to open the door from the outside. She told the dispatcher they were trying to get somewhere safe. Her voice was steady throughout. Ruby Smith, in the passenger seat of a car running from an armed, intoxicated deputy on a dark Georgia highway, was building the prosecution's case in real time. Every detail she named was captured, logged, and irrefutably dated to the minutes before a single shot connected with their vehicle. Ragsdale's own dispatch was relaying the substance of her call while he was behind them. He did not know the call was happening. That is the fact that the defense could never reach around. The pursuit moved through 3 miles of county road, Ragsdale's lights behind them, radio traffic thickening as other units were flagged. Idris driving with both hands on the wheel and his eyes tracking between the road ahead and the lights behind. Ruby stayed on the line. The dispatcher was asking questions. She answered while watching the rear window. They passed the grain storage facility on Route 7. They reached the first intersection. Ragsdale fired from his cruiser at the intersection, the moving vehicle on a public county road. 2 unarmed civilians inside. The contents of the car confirmed by his own dispatch in real time. The shot missed. The pursuit continued north on Route 7 toward the water tower junction. The gap between the 2 vehicles shifted as the road shifted, opening on the straight sections, closing at the turns. Ragsdale did not fall back. He did not redirect. He did not hand off the pursuit to the units being repositioned on the parallel road 2 miles west. He stayed behind them, and the weapons stayed in the equation. Here is where the story becomes something the defense had no answer for. Gary Ragsdale did not fire once in a moment of overwhelmed judgment. He did not fire twice in an extended confrontation with an armed and threatening suspect. He fired at 3 separate locations across 3 miles of Harlan County Highway. 3 distinct moments. 3 distinct decisions. Each one made by a man who knew, because his department was telling him, that the car in front of him contained 2 unarmed civilians who had fled a stop because the deputy conducting it smelled like bourbon and had tried to open their door without cause. 1 shot during a pursuit is a reflex. Juries understand reflexes. Defense attorneys know how to build a case around the half-second compression of fear and adrenaline. The law has architecture for that argument. It is imperfect architecture, but it exists and it has worked before. 3 shots across 3 locations is not a reflex. It is a record. It is a GPS-logged, bodycam-captured, dispatch time-stamped record of repeated choices made by the same person in the same pursuit. Every pin on the prosecution's map was a separate decision. The jury would look at that map for 3 days. Ruby was on the line with 911 when the second shot was fired. She had described the smell, named the road, and told the dispatcher the deputy was not right before a single bullet left that weapon. Do you think that 911 call was the piece of evidence that made this verdict inevitable? Drop yes or no in the comments and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The third shot found the car. One round entered through the rear passenger door. The second struck Ruby in the head. The 911 call was still connected. The dispatcher heard the change, not the impact, but the sudden shift in the quality of the car. Idris's voice, the absence of Ruby's. Idris looked over. He pulled onto the shoulder. He was saying her name before the car had fully stopped. The particular rawness of a person calling to someone who was no longer responding in the way they were a moment ago. Ragsdale's cruiser came in behind them. The units repositioned on the parallel road arrived less than 2 minutes later, pulling in from the adjacent farm road, too late to redirect the pursuit, and now standing at the end of it instead. Ruby was airlifted from the scene. Idris was separated from her by the systematic, procedural machinery that arrives with every cluster of uniforms, statements, positioning, the managed separation of involved parties that is standard, and also, in this case, the last time Idris would be near his wife while she was alive. At the scene, after the helicopter had gone and the remaining units were standing in the road, a voice on the body cam said it plainly, that Ragsdale should have just let them go, that it would have been a DUI charge maybe, that now it was a whole thing, not grief, not recognition of what had happened to the two people in that car, an operational inconvenience noted aloud on a running camera at a crime scene. The body cam captured it the way body cams capture everything, without commentary, without awareness of what it was recording, without any understanding that this sentence would play in a courtroom without a single word of framing required. Route 7 went quiet. Units parked at angles across both lanes. The engine of Idris's car was still running. The 911 call finally disconnected after 38 minutes on the line. On Saturday morning, Ruby Smith died. She had been airlifted from Harlan County Regional Medical Center to a trauma facility in Atlanta where a surgical team worked for 7 hours. 7 hours is not a number that signals inadequate effort. It signals the opposite. On Saturday morning, the day after a dinner at Meridian Steakhouse with a reservation and shoes off in a car on a highway that should have taken both of them straight home, she was gone. She was 38 years old. She had not been speeding. She had not been drinking. She had not committed a moving violation or presented a threat or given Gary Ragsdale a single justifiable reason to run her plates, let alone follow her car down a county highway for a quarter mile before lighting it up. She had assessed the situation at the window correctly. She had documented it in real time. She had done everything available to her. None of it kept her alive. All of it kept Ragsdale from walking away. He was suspended within hours of the shooting and terminated before the weekend ended. The toxicology results confirmed .16, twice the legal driving limit, close to 4 times what any Georgia law enforcement agency permitted for an officer in the field. The charges followed: aggravated murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, official misconduct. The department's statement called his conduct inexcusable. It was the first accurate word the institution had produced since the night it happened. The trial ran 8 weeks. The prosecution built its case on 3 foundations: the toxicology report, the body cam footage, and Ruby Smith's 911 call, played in full for the jury on the second day of proceedings. Her voice filled the courtroom. She named the smell. She gave the road. She said she was frightened and that something was not right with the officer behind them. The defense argued threat perception, darkness, a fleeing vehicle, the physical impossibility of sound decision-making under pursuit conditions. The prosecution played the call again. Then the map went up. 3 pins, 3 locations, and it stayed on screen. The jury took 3 days before the verdict. Ragsdale was given the opportunity to address the court. He stood at the lectern and spoke about his uncle, a retired deputy sheriff in the same county, a man he had watched put on a uniform since he was a child. He said he had wanted that life since he was 8 years old. He said he had never intended for anyone to be hurt. He said he was sorry for what had happened to the Smith family. His hands were folded. His voice was quiet. He did not look at Idris Smith. seated 12 feet to his left. The narration does not treat this as performance. Ragsdale stood before a court and spoke about his uncle, and produced the only apology available to a person who has not yet reached the accounting of what they did. The love for his uncle was real. The grief in his voice was real. These things were present in the room, and they were real. Idris Smith sat 12 feet away and received every word of it. He had spoken that morning, his own statement, measured and precise, telling the court about the 911 call she had made, about what she said to him before the car moved, about the last seconds of her voice before everything changed. He had not asked the court for anything beyond its attention. He told them what happened to his wife on a road she had every right to travel, and then he sat down and he listened to the man who had shot her describe the uncle he had wanted to make proud. 12 feet, and everything that 12 feet contained.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. 3 charges. The same word returned against each one, not with drama, with the flat, complete authority of a system that had taken 8 weeks and 3 days of deliberation to arrive at what the body cam and a 38-minute 911 call had documented in 18 minutes on a county road. The courtroom received it. Idris Smith received it. The 3 locations on Route 7 received at last their correct designation. Judge Helen Plummer sentenced Gary Ragsdale to 9 years in state prison for aggravated murder, 5 additional years for aggravated assault to be served consecutively, 14 years. Parole eligibility after 11 years served. 14 years is the distance between the man who stood at that lectern and whoever walks out of a Georgia State facility if that day comes. It is not a fine. It is not a placed on leave pending review. It is the full weight of the system brought to bear on a specific series of choices made on a specific road on a specific night. Not because the system always works, but because this time the body cam was rolling, and a 38-year-old federal judge in the passenger seat had the presence of mind to pick up her phone. It is not justice. Justice would require Ruby Smith to be alive. The Smith family and Idris Smith did not receive justice. They received a verdict. The difference between those two things is permanent, and it matters, and this story does not pretend otherwise. What they received was the concrete, limited, real acknowledgement that what happened on Route 7 was not going to be processed into a file and absorbed, that it was going to be named, charged, tried, and sentenced. That this time the institution looked at what its deputy had done while drunk and armed on a public highway and called it by its correct name from the beginning. Route 7 looks the same. Flat road, dark shoulders, the grain storage facility still standing at the first intersection, the water tower still visible at the junction. The 3 locations where Ragsdale raised his weapon and fired are unmarked. Nothing distinguishes them from any other stretch of Harlan County asphalt on a clear night. The road does not carry what happened on it. Roads do not. Idris Smith does. He drives the same route. Whether the distance feels different at night, the legal record does not say. The verdict did not return what was in the passenger seat. It did not give back the reservation, the shoes off, the particular quality of the drive home after a night that had gone exactly right. It returned 3 words, the same word 3 times, and the insufficient but real knowledge that what happened to Ruby on a public Georgia highway was not going to disappear. Somewhere in a Georgia State facility, Gary Ragsdale is in the early arithmetic of 14 years, learning in whatever way that kind of learning arrives, that a county road and 2 people heading home was all it took, that 18 minutes was enough, that a woman's voice on a 911 recording, calm, specific, and time-stamped before the first shot was more than sufficient to account for 3 shots, 3 locations, and 14 years. The body cam captured all of it. It always does. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.